Well, good morning and welcome on this Tuesday morning to our daily download. I am Alicia and I am so happy to be joining you this morning as we jump right in to words. We are right in the middle of this sermon series with Pastor Brent about speaking life. And it makes me want to sit back and think just a little bit. What does that mean for us as parents as we travel on this parent journey to speak life into our children? Ooh. It's a little heavy, actually, if you think about it. But God certainly calls us to this place where our words really do matter, and our words matter so much to the people who are right around us all day, every day in our house, our children. So whether you're a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, or an uncle, chances are you're around someone that's a little bit younger than you, that is looking up to you and holding on to every word that is coming out of your mouth. You don't even realize all the words that you're saying until you hear those words repeated out of someone younger. I'll never forget, Maddie was little bitty and she was in her room playing school. Now this is kind of tricky because I'm her mom, but I was also a teacher at the time. So here she is playing school and I hear these words echoed out of her mouth and I'm like, did I say that in the house? Did she hear that in the classroom? Was that her teacher? Like, where are these words coming from? But the truth is, kids are holding on to our words. The words that come out of our mouth are the words that are constantly going through their heads and the words that they're repeating. So when God talks in Proverbs about the power of the tongue to give life or death, it's no joke. It's for real. So are our words pouring life into our children, building up our children, or are they pouring in this negativity that's tearing them down and really causing destruction in their lives? So it really makes you stop and think like, oh, where am I in this? And what does this look like for me in my house? We often talk about words in our house. And now that my children are older, I kind of wonder, like, what would they say? What would they say are words that we repeated often and often? And I asked both of them, like, what's something that you would remember Jason and I saying to you, your parents? And they're like, oh, we don't quit. Thurstons don't quit. So I'm like, somewhere along the way, they've gotten this message from us that we work hard, that we keep at whatever it is we're working towards, and we don't quit. Think about that in your own house. What are those messages that you're sending over and over and over again to your kiddos? And how is that transpiring in their day-to-day life and in there when I'm grown up and I look back onto my time in this house, that those words that they repeat in their head over and over. And so it really got me to thinking, like, how can we do this? How can we turn these habits into something that happens every day in our house? On this parent journey, anytime you're in a milestone class, we talk about things we know all kids need. And words come up not once, but twice. We know that kids need words because all words give us direction. Interesting that words give us direction, right? Because God gives us His word. The direction for our life is given to us in the Bible. So of course we know that this is true for our kids. And we also know that kids need stories. Kids need stories because stories give us a greater perspective on life. They help us to see things from other people's perspectives, from a bigger perspective, which is also interesting because if you think about Jesus and His teaching, what did He do all the time? He teaches in parables. He tells these stories that help people see a bigger picture, a God-sized picture that He's trying to get the audience, whoever He was teaching at that particular moment. So if we're thinking about our words and God's called us to speak life, not just to all the people around us, but to speak life to our children, then how are we incorporating God's word into our everyday life? You know, this week in Kidsmen, we taught the story about the widow. In 1 Kings, we talked about this widow. Elijah was going through this moment where there's extreme drought, and he knew that this drought was coming. God had told him that this drought was coming, and he was preparing Elijah for this drought, and he told him to stay by this river, and Elijah's camped out by this river, and every day the birds bring him some food, and he has water in the river to drink. Well, the drought continues, and the water goes away. And so Elijah, God brings to, and it's so beautiful that it says this, then the word of the Lord came to him. So the word of the Lord comes to Elijah. And if the word of the Lord will come to Elijah, then we can bring the word of the Lord to our kids each and every day. So here's Elijah. He gets this word from God, and God's telling him to go to this widow and that she will have food for him. So Elijah does exactly what God tells him, and he goes. And if we keep reading in First King, we get to the place where Elijah gets to the widow, and he's talking to her. And he came to the gate of the city. Behold, a widow was there gathering sticks. She's out gathering sticks. And he calls to her, and he asks her to bring him a water in a vessel that I may drink. And as she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. And she said, as the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. So if you see right here, we have, just a little flour and a little oil. And the widow knew this is all she had left in her house. There was no more. In fact, the Bible tells us that she was out getting sticks to prepare this last bit of flour, this last bit of oil for her and her son. And she was preparing for this to be their last meal. The Bible even tells us that she was getting ready. She thought this was going to be her last meal, and then they would no longer be, that they would die. So here she meets Elijah. He's asking for this food, and she's like, this is all I have left. But she's obedient. If your God says that this is what I need to do, she goes, she makes the bread with the last bit of flour that she has, the last bit of oil that she has, and she shares it with her son and with Elijah, only to find that God continues to replenish every day more flour, more oil, a miracle of God that we see all the way back in First King. And so I'm thinking, moms and dads, it's just that easy. Here you are in the kitchen, you need some flour or you need some oil, and you can talk to your kids about, this reminds me of this story back in First Kings with Elijah and this widow and how God provided. And then there's so many questions that you can ask about, what is our God? What is our part in this story? What is God trying to teach us in this story? What can we learn from Elijah and his obedience to follow God? Or what can we learn about the widow in her obedience to God, but also in her generosity? When she had nothing left, she still gave what she had. So many lessons and so many conversations that can be had with words that are going to speak truth and life into our kiddos instead of tearing them down and causing destruction. So think about your words. Think about those everyday habits, the simple act of getting some flour or some oil out of the cabinet and turning that into something that God's talked about in his word, and having conversations with our kiddos that are just as natural as making bread in the kitchen. So we have a big challenge to not just speak life with our words to the people around us, to our neighbors, to our friends, but we have this opportunity to speak life into our children. So join me in this challenge. How can we speak life this week to those that are the closest to us and those who are far away with our words? Thanks for joining me today on this digital download. I look forward to hearing your stories.